And what we actually find is that richer people actually have less children and poorer people actually have more children. So not only is it that the evidence is lacking, the evidence that exists is counter to the actual theory.
First, let me point out that evolution by natural selection is the best explanation of how we got to the diversity of life that we see on Earth. It is not a blueprint of how humans should live. It does not follow that somebody who accepts the theory of evolution would live their life according to survival of the fittest. Such a person can still show charity and compassion to others. Having said that, let's look at some reasons why richer and more intelligent people might have fewer children. This study, which initially looked at birth order and intelligence, found that birth order is not associated with intelligence, but children from larger families tend to be less intelligent than children in smaller households. Also, richer and more intelligent people value quality over quantity. They want to give their children a higher quality of life and so tend to have fewer children. Most people would prefer a fewer number of higher achieving children than a larger number of less achieving children.
That we normally think of evolution from a biological perspective, but we don't think of the moral implications or the psychological implications. And it has to be there because our psychology breaks down to our biology from them. And our biology breaks down to chemistry, and chemistry breaks down to physics, physics breaks down to maths.
There are no moral or psychological implications. Again, you can accept the theory of evolution as the best explanation for the speciation we see today. It has no implication on your worldview of how we should live. Breaking psychology down into matter does not mean that people who accept evolution, or atheists in general, must think in terms of blind, undirected processes.
I mean, people like Richard Dawkins love to talk about morality and ethics and human rights and civilizations and values and all these things. Yet, when push comes to shove and he was asked, isn't it true that rape is just as arbitrary as the fact that we have 5 fingers rather than 6? He had to admit to that.
Did he, Subboor? Did he really say that? Let's check and see.
I'm interested in asking about if morality is something that's evolved within us and was susceptible to similar arbitrariness. Is the fact that rape is wrong as arbitrary as the fact that we have 5 fingers instead of 6?
I don't think so, because I think, once again, rape causes suffering.
But then the fact that we experience suffering and the fact that we call that suffering is something that's evolved.
You're being too philosophical for
We
me.
could call something else.
Yeah. No, I mean, 6 fingers versus 4 fingers or 5 fingers is not a question where suffering arises.
So, Subboor, Richard Dawkins did not say what you said he said. In fact, he said something completely different.
Disputes.
Disputes,
Right.
PAD, right? Probabilistic framework assumptions, disputes.
Yes.
Now, you find disputes all across the various fields of evolutionary biology.
There are disputes all over science. Scientists have different hypotheses which they offer and then test out. Critics like to display these disputes as arguments about the core of a theory, rather than a discussion about the less established periphery of a theory.
So, for example, we have James Shapiro, and again, not a religious scientist by any measure, and he believes that we can challenge Darwinism and have an alternative, and he thinks that is evolution by natural genetic engineering.
James Shapiro proposed the idea of natural genetic engineering to explain discoveries in molecular biology that he thought were not adequately explained by the modern synthesis. His ideas have attracted criticism and have failed to gain much traction, though I should also point out that it's possible for natural genetic engineering, if it works, to work alongside the modern synthesis.
Right.
We have Eva Jablanka. She believes we can challenge Darwinism by neo-Lamarckism.
Eva Jablonka has done work on epigenetic inheritance, which she argues to be Lamarckian. Lamarckism is the notion that an organism can pass on to its offspring physical characteristics that the parent organism acquired. The validity of this is disputed, and any epigenetic inheritance can work alongside the modern synthesis.
We have people like Masatoshi Nai from Japan. He wants to challenge Darwinism and he wants to replace it with neo-mutationism.
Masatoshi Nai advanced a theory of mutation-driven evolution. Mutationism was discarded by most biologists, as essentially all its claims of evolution can be explained by Darwinian evolution, which is the modern synthesis. This isn't the first time that Subboor Ahmad has quoted Masatoshi Nai. Here is a clip from the debate between Aron Ra and Subboor Ahmad, where a member of the audience approaches Aron Ra.
Hi.
I'm a PhD student in evolutionary biology. I just defended my thesis in November. And what's really interesting is he keeps talking about Ney, and Ney was the thesis advisor for a professor in my department. And the thing that he says about Darwinian evolution is that he thinks that natural selection exists to eliminate deleterious genotypes. And that's what he's actually saying.
Are you saying that my opponent is quoting from scientists when he doesn't understand what they're saying?
I'm afraid so.
The next section is a long, rambling rant about the just-so stories of Rudyard Kipling and how they equate to evolutionary developmental biology. These are, of course, just fables. Evolutionary developmental biology and developmental regulatory genes is an interesting subject area, too long to cover in this analysis, and doesn't detract from the modern synthesis in any way.
How should Muslims deal with any conflicting theory to the Quran or Islam more generally?
All right, brilliant. The first thing is we will accept all scientific theories as working theories, models, paradigms. Accepting it as science doesn't mean we're accepting it to be true literally.
Nobody is expecting you to accept science as true in a literal sense, just to accept it as true in a scientific sense.
The Quran is something that we have independent evidence for. So the arguments for the miraculous nature of the Quran, it gives us reasons to believe this is the word of God. Now, if this the word of God, and if this is something which we know can change the problem of induction, problem of undetermination, problem of unconceived alternatives, paradigm shifts, and so on and so forth, then of course there are going to be times where there seems to be a conflict.
Yes.
However, that conflict is not in reality. That conflict is in our understanding of the world.
And now we see the agenda for this video. He thinks science is acceptable as long as it doesn't contradict the Quran. So he will not believe in human-chimp common ancestry, despite all the evidence, but he will believe in the mythical Burak.
Methodological naturalism means that as a methodology, scientists do not accept anything which is supernatural.
Here we need to be clear that science is limited to methodological naturalism, as there is no reliable way to test for the supernatural. Science cannot invoke the supernatural until there are testable and verifiable ways to do this. Until such a time, science is limited to naturalism, examining the natural causes for explanations of events. I should also point out the difference between methodological naturalism and philosophical naturalism, which makes the claim that only natural causes exist. Methodological naturalism does not make that claim and is limited to naturalism only by methodology.
To get back to your bold statement before, you were claiming that evolution is now being seen as a religion. So tell us what you mean by this, and it does sound quite shocking.
It does
Yes.
indeed. And what we find later on when we look at people like Richard Dawkins in his book The Blind Watchmaker, again you can see it's not just a scientific theory for him. He says Darwin allowed us to be intellectually satisfied atheists.
Dawkins was not equating evolution by natural selection to a religion. At the time, the design argument for a god was most compelling. This is the teleological argument. Darwin showed how even the most complex organisms could be created by the simple mechanisms of random chance and natural selection. Therefore, no creator is required. That simple finding destroyed the basis of all religions, and by doing that removed the only real obstacle to atheism.
Yeah.
Now, recently in 2016, Michael Roos, who's the best Darwinian academic in the world.
Michael Roos is a philosopher. What on earth do you mean by the best Darwinian academic in the world? How on earth is that decided?
You can go and Google him, look at his works. He's an atheist, he's a Darwinist, but he published a book called Darwinism as Religion. And again, he argues Darwinian evolution is a science, but beyond that, from its very inception to today, it is also a metaphysical worldview. He published this with Oxford University.
A book published by Oxford University Press should not be assumed to be the opinion of Oxford University, but only that of the author. Here are some reviews of this book. It is described as a polemic. Even if some people choose to make Darwinism a religion, this does not detract from its scientific merit in any way.
In a few months' time, we're going to be publishing a book called Failed Hypothesis, long overdue, and inshallah, that book is going to have all the information that you need to tackle this topic.
I will look forward to analysing it. This is the end of my analysis. Please tell me what you think in the comments section, and like and subscribe. Thank you. Goodbye.